Hey Potato, I'm going over the plot while breaking down how to beat the killer in the 1997 American slasher film titled Scream 2, about former high schooler Sidney Prescott and some of our other favorite survivors of the Woodsboro Massacre from the first Scream movie, who are now at college living their best life when a copycat Ghostface killer with a very interesting motive makes his appearance and all hell breaks loose. And the reveal near the end of the movie of the killer's identities will blow your mind. Putty please! Don't forget, if you want to see more of these labor-intensive videos continue from your favorite nitpicky movie nerd, do me a favor and show your support by leaving a comment on the video, and most importantly, click that like button to give my channel a boost in the YouTube algorithm. Alright then, let's start the video. Scream 2 begins with a very cute chocolatey college couple, Maureen and Phil, standing in line for a special advance showing of a movie called Stab, which is a film based on the now famous events that occurred in the first Scream movie. The movie studio behind Stab, for this sneak preview showing, has the theater employees handing out Ghostface costumes that even come with fake knives. It's the new Ghostface killer's lucky day, because thanks to this, there's a bunch of idiots running around the theater in Ghostface costumes pretending to stab each other, which makes it significantly easier for a real killer to get away with an actual murder. A few minutes into the horror movie, Bill needs to drain the old garden hose, so he heads to the bathroom to take a piss when he hears the sound of faint sex noises coming from inside a bathroom stall. Being the horn dog that he is, Phil puts his ears to the stall to better listen to the possible X-rated activities going on inside. Unfortunately for Phil, it's the new Ghostface killer inside that stall who's behind the noises, who then puts a knife into Phil's brain by stabbing through the bathroom stall like it's a stick of butter, and the guy dies almost instantly. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. The knife Ghostface uses is a modified Buck 120, which is a common 8-inch hunting knife, and hunting knives are designed for cutting, not stabbing. The hunting knife's curved blade is good for skinning animals, and the single sharpened edge on these knives are great for cutting meat slices, but these two features make them unsuitable for effectively stabbing things. In real life, just stabbing a hunting knife through a 1-inch solid plastic bathroom partition constructed of high-density polyethylene like the one in this movie scene would be impossible, not to even mention getting the knife through a human skull at the same time. You've got nothing to worry about if you are in this situation. This kill is physically impossible. Back to the story. Ghostface puts on Phil's leather jacket after murdering him and sits next to Maureen, pretending to be her date. While the two watch the movie together and Maureen is cuddling what she thinks is her boyfriend, she gets an unknown red liquid on her hands, and as she's mentally processing what's happening, like, wait, is this blood? Ghostface suddenly pulls out a knife, and Maureen screams in terror before he plunges the blade into her stomach. After being stabbed, Maureen slowly gets out of her seat. She even paused to dramatically stare at her stomach wound and look back at Ghostface in shock, which made it ridiculously easy for the killer to grab her from behind and repeatedly stab her some more times. Sadly, the cheering from the loud theater crowd that got excited about a scene in the movie completely drowned out Maureen's screaming. Everybody was too distracted watching the film to notice the murder in progress, and the people that did notice what was going on thought the killer and Maureen were just playing around, like the countless other idiots in there that were wearing Ghostface costumes and pretending to stab each other. After the killer is done stabbing her up, Maureen slowly limps her way to the front stage of the theater and then lets out one last dramatic scream before she finally succumbs to her knife wounds. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. The time between Ghostface initially pulling out his knife and then dramatically holding it in front of Maureen long enough for her to scream before finally plunging it into the victim's stomach was approximately 2.5 seconds. The average human reaction time to a visual stimulus is 0.25 seconds. This means Maureen had plenty of time to mentally process what was happening and respond accordingly. Instead of wasting time screaming, Maureen should have immediately turned her back to the killer while curling up into a ball as much as possible, making sure to position her arms at her sides and across the front of her torso to better protect her vital organs from the first knife stab. Maureen's next mistake was getting up from her seat to move horizontally towards the theater aisle. Her actions were far too inconspicuous and allowed her to go unnoticed by the distracted surrounding moviegoers that could have helped her fight the killer off. If you were in this situation, you need to be moving vertically into the rows above or below you to to physically tackle or grab the nearest people in your vicinity, with the goal of hiding behind them and pushing them between you and the killer. This forces the people around you to pay attention to your plight and become involved in the conflict. Back to the story. The scene cuts to Windsor College, where Sidney Prescott and Randy Meeks, the former high schooler characters from Scream 1, are now grown up and attending college. Cotton Weary, the falsely accused man in prison that was set up by Billy Loomis in Scream 1, has been exonerated of all wrongdoings and is now desperately pursuing fame and money by trying his best to talk his way onto any television program that will allow him on to tell his side of the story regarding the now famous events that happened in the first Scream movie. Sidney and Randy have heard the news about the movie theater murders and argue about what they should do next. Randy is in denial and thinks it was just an isolated incident that has nothing to do with them, while Sidney insists that it wasn't a coincidence that the victims were students from the same college that they attend, and that she's confident this is a copycat Ghostface serial killer that will eventually come after them. Sidney's new boyfriend Derek Feldman heard the news and shows up to express concern and promise Sidney that he'll protect her. Local and national news reporters show up at Windsor College to interview students and report on the press conference that the local police department is holding regarding the theater murders. And we are blessed with the return of the ambitious news reporter Gale Weathers, who's now famous and highly respected in her field for her reporting on and best-selling book about the events from Scream 1. A local journalist, Debbie Salt, approaches the now mini-celebrity Gale Weathers to get her take on the recent events, and Gale refuses to be interviewed. Remember this event because Debbie Salt is going to be an important character later on in the movie. The local police chief Lewis Hartley begins the press conference and is bombarded with questions by Gale. In a nutshell, at this point the police believe the movie theater murders were an isolated incident and not the work of a serial killer. Randomly, Sidney notices Deputy Dewey from Scream 1 wandering on campus, so she approaches him to say hello. He took time off work to fly all the way down to Windsor College to protect Sidney and Randy from what he believes to be a new Ghostface serial killer. He's like a big brother to them. The two sit down to talk, and Dewey warns her to be careful of the people closest to her, because if the killer is anything like Billy and Stu from Scream 1, then they'll likely get a sick pleasure from being in Sidney's life while they plan her murder. But Sidney says she can't just cut off everybody in her life and crawl under a rock. Personally, I value my life more than I do maintaining relationships with friends. After her conversation with Dewey, Sidney meets up with her boyfriend Derek and his best friend Mickey and her very sexy, chocolatey roommate named Haley, and that's when Gale spots and approaches Sidney to pressure her into an interview. Gale is back to her old tricks. She lied to the fame-hungry Cotton about Sidney agreeing to finally participate in a news interview with him. The American public and news media is much more interested in getting Sidney in front of a camera because she's the former primary target and ex-girlfriend of the previous Ghostface killer, which is why Cotton is so thirsty to leverage Sidney to get his moment in the spotlight. But Sidney has never wanted the attention, and up to this point has been avoiding the media like the plague. So Sidney backhands the taste out of Gale's mouth when she realizes the insensitive reporter is trying to surprise her with a very awkward and unwanted interview with Cotton, aka the man who she wrongfully accused and put in jail for her mother's murder in Scream 1. There's a whole lot of negative emotions being stirred up, and Sidney has to be held back and pulled away by her friends to stop her from beating the crap out of Gale. After her public embarrassment at the hands of Sidney, Gale stumbles into Dewey, who's pissed off and doesn't want to talk to her. In Gale's best-selling book about the events of Scream 1, she described Deputy Dewey as being a bumbling, inexperienced idiot, and he wasn't very pleased to find out that the woman he developed a crush on deep down thought he was a dimwit and was probably just using him to get closer to the previous Ghostface investigation. It's nighttime now, and college student Cece Cooper is alone in her sorority house watching television when she gets a phone call from Ghostface. At first she thinks it's just a creepy prank caller trying to scare her. Then Cece, who's now on edge after hanging up on the creepy phone call, gets scared half to death by her sorority sister Donna popping up behind her out of nowhere. Looks like Cece's not the only person in the sorority house like she thought. The two girls left the front door open, and while they are distracted with a phone call, Ghostface uses the opportunity to sneak inside the house unseen. Then Donna heads out the door to go to a college party, leaving Cece alone inside the house with Ghostface. Cece gets another threatening phone call from Ghostface, which she hangs up on. Then she hears the sounds of footsteps coming from somewhere inside the house, so so of course she has to nervously investigate. Her levels of paranoia and anxiety are skyrocketing when she gets another phone call, and as she's picking up the house phone, Ghostface pops up behind her from inside a closet. Ghostface chases the terrified sorority girl upstairs. While on the second floor, Cece stops to pick up and throw a houseplant at the killer. They then run to the third floor, where she stops to push a bicycle into his path. Ghostface finally catches up to Cece, pushes her through a glass balcony door, stabs the poor girl multiple times in her back, and then tosses the girl off the third floor balcony to fall to her death. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. Cece stopping her running to throw relatively small and lightweight objects that merely bounced off the killer or inconvenienced him for a split second was completely pointless and only served to help Ghostface catch up to her. Not doing this would have increased her chances of making it inside a room with enough time to lock the door behind her so she can carefully lower herself out of a window instead of jumping out in a hurry to escape the killer. The next mistake Cece made was running to the third floor. Being that high up from the ground severely limited her escape options. In most US states, the standard second-story residential building has a second-story floor that is 9 to 10 feet in the air. From the ground to the typical residential building's third-level floor is usually around 18 to 20 feet. People typically survive falls from a height of 20 to 25 feet, but injury is almost a guarantee when falling from around these heights. Cece needs to be able to run away from the killer after jumping out of a house window, and falling from the second floor gives her a high probability of that happening, but falling from the third floor does not. You can further decrease your chances of injury by making sure to bend your knees and keep your legs together when you land, which helps absorb the force of the impact. Back to the story. While Sydney's at a college party with her friends and boyfriend, two girls at the party announce that police are everywhere and there's rumors of a dead student at a nearby sorority house, aka CC Cooper. All the people at the party run outside to see for themselves if the news is true, except Sydney and her boyfriend. Local reporter Debbie Salt is at the crime scene getting information from the forensic investigator and police on the case. Gail arrives on the crime scene and stumbles into Dewey, but he's still pissed off at her and has no interest in talking to her or helping her in any way. Sydney walks back inside the party house to grab her jacket so that Derek can escort her back to her home for safety. While back inside the house, the phone rings and Sydney feels compelled to answer it. Surprise! It's Ghostface. After a short conversation with the killer, Sydney hangs up the phone, and as she turns around to leave, she discovers Ghostface is behind her and just locked the front door. Derek, who wasn't paying attention before, hears screaming coming from inside, looks through the front door window, and realizes that Sydney is in danger. Ghostface continues his pursuit of Sydney around the house, and she's able to make it to an open patio door, where she stumbles into Derek. Derek, wanting to be a hero and look manly in front of his girlfriend, runs inside the house to find and confront Ghostface. Can we just take a moment to recognize how suspicious or stupid Sydney's boyfriend is? He has no weapon, and no martial arts or street fighting experience that we know of, yet he feels like it's a good idea to run headfirst into a confrontation against a killer with a knife. My first thoughts in response to this foolishness is that Derek must be working with Ghostface and is trying to prevent himself from being viewed as a potential suspect by becoming a supposed victim that was attacked by the killer. Anyways, Dewey shows up on the scene seconds after Derek runs inside the house. Sydney tells him what happened, so then Dewey goes inside the house to help, and he only finds an injured Derek on the ground, with a minor cut to his forearm, which increased my suspicion of the boyfriend even more. Mickey, Haley, and Sydney are at the hospital waiting on Derek to be released by his doctor, and for the police to finish questioning him. The cops also think Derek's behavior was suspicious. The next day, Gail and Dewey are at the police station helping the police chief brainstorm connections between the recent victims to help identify the killer. The chief mentions that Cece's real name is Casey, which gives Gail a light bulb moment. Turns out all the victims so far have been students that share the first or last names of people murdered by the first Ghostface killers. If they were smart, the police department could save lives and possibly set a trap for Ghostface by correctly predicting the next victim thanks to Gail figuring out that this is a copycat killer. They just need to acquire a list of all currently enrolled students at Windsor College so they can filter it down to a much smaller list of possible victims that share any part of their names with Ghostface victims from Scream 1. Sydney is now being guarded 24/7 by two detectives. Things get a little emotional between Sydney and Derek. She tells him it would be in his best interest to stay as far away from her as possible, since he's already gotten hurt by the killer because he's hanging around her and it might happen again. Derek insists that he loves her too much to distance himself, and questions whether this has more to do with Sydney not trusting him than it does with her being concerned about his safety. In the cafeteria, Mickey is excitedly telling Haley and Derek his theories on who he thinks the killer is. Then Sydney sits down at their table, and Derek, being the love-sick simp that he is, decides to climb on the table and start singing a corny love song to his girlfriend. Derek ends his embarrassing little musical number with giving Sydney his fraternity Greek letters necklace, which according to Haley is a big no-no that will get him in trouble with his frats. So yeah, Derek is simping pretty hard right now. Dewey, Gale, and Randy meet on the college campus lawn to discuss who the next possible victim could be. When Randy gets a phone call from Ghostface, the killer makes a snide comment, hinting that he's watching them on the campus lawn, which gives the group an idea to identify the killer. The plan is Randy keeps Ghostface talking on the phone for as long as possible, while Gale and Dewey comb the surrounding area, checking everyone they see with a cell phone. If they find someone with Randy on the phone line, then that must be the killer. Unfortunately, things don't work out the way they hoped. Randy is standing in front of Gale's news van with his back turned when Ghostface pops out of the vehicle and grabs Randy from behind, closes the van door, and then proceeds to stab the poor guy to death. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. Moments before he's ambushed, Randy is shown grabbing a cell phone from a random guy to check if he's the killer. What's important about this scene is that the news van is shown in the background with its doors shut. That means the killer had to first open the van doors before he could grab Randy, which would take at least a couple seconds to do, especially if the killer is trying to open it as quietly as possible by slowly inching the door open. Either way, there's no such thing as a completely silent van door. Opening a van sliding door is going to make a sound no matter what you do. Anybody who's ever been in one can attest to this.
Shut it again.
The average reaction time for humans to an audio stimulus is 0.17 seconds. So if Randy had even a crumb of situational awareness and was not so completely consumed with yelling at Ghostface on the phone because he was insulted by the killer moments before he was pulled into the van, then he should have heard the sliding van doors opening less than a foot behind him, and he had plenty of time for his brain to process and react to what was happening. It took Ghostface approximately 2 seconds to pop his body out and then pull Randy into the van, and then approximately another 1.5 seconds to close the van doors once Randy was inside. The average reaction time for humans for a touch stimulus is 0.15 seconds. That means from the moment Randy felt the killer's hand touch his body, he had plenty of time to react by screaming at the top of his lungs to draw attention and help from the many people surrounding the vehicle. Conveniently, once Randy is inside the van and the doors have been closed, a group of students playing loud music on a boombox then walk by the van, which drowns out the sound of Randy and the killer struggling against each other. Their struggling is pretty quiet. At no point during the fight with the killer, even before and after the kids with the loud boombox walk by, does Randy even attempt screaming to draw attention to himself. All you hear inside the van is strained breathing and grunting from the two wrestling with each other. What's even weirder about this entire scenario is that the van's passenger side window is shown to have been rolled down, so it would be impossible for people outside to not hear the sounds of Randy's confrontation out of an open window. All he had to do was scream at some point to save himself. And if the passenger side window was rolled down this whole time, how did Randy not hear Ghostface talking to him on the phone inside the van before he was grabbed by the killer? Anyways, Gale and Dewey finally notice that Randy is missing. They look around and see that the news van now has a broken window, thanks to the struggle that just occurred inside, and when they check the vehicle, they find Randy's dead body. RIP my favorite character in this movie. We get some good news. Ghostface left his costume in the van. The killer's costume should have plenty of skin and hair cells on it that can be DNA tested to identify them. It's likely the killer is a student or member of the faculty at Windsor College. How else are they able to identify and target students with first and last names that are the same as the victims from Scream 1? So the police just have to request that people attending or working at the college willingly submit to DNA testing to compare their genetic material to those found on the killer's discarded Ghostface costume. Innocent people typically don't have a problem with voluntarily being DNA tested, and the police can then focus their investigation investigation on the smaller number of potential suspects that refuse to comply. Sydney's at the college's library using the computer when the killer sends her a threatening instant message that she's going to die tonight and the police can't save her. She didn't sign on the computer using her student login credentials, which means the killer had to have sent her the message from a library computer since all the terminals are connected. The detectives that are guarding Sydney 24/7 comb through the library computers trying to figure out which computer the message came from, and Sydney is hiding in a corner when she gets approached by Cotton Wary. Needless to say, this is some pretty suspicious timing. Cotton tries to guilt trip Sydney into agreeing to do an interview with him on Diane Sawyer's national television program. Diane Sawyer is a big-name broadcast journalist who offered Cotton this interview opportunity on the condition that Sydney is a part of the show. Sydney refuses, and Cotton gets really pushy with her out of frustration. According to Cotton, it's the least Sydney could do for him, since her testimony is the reason he was wrongfully sent to prison for the murder of her mother. Sydney's bodyguards finally notice Cotton, and he's taken into police custody for suspicion of being the person who sent Sydney the threatening computer messages, but the police ultimately have to let him go because they don't have any concrete evidence to connect Cotton to the crime. A forensic computer analyst could easily figure out which library computer the threatening messages were sent from. Then the police just need to interview people who were in the library at the same time who are also near the guilty computer to piece together what the suspect looks like. If the library has surveillance cameras, figuring out who was using the guilty computer would be even easier. The police chief tells Sydney that they are relocating her to a secret location for safety, but first her detective bodyguards are going to escort her to her dorm room so that she can pack her belongings, and her best friend Haley is allowed to tag along for emotional support. Local news reporter Debbie Salt makes another appearance as Cotton is walking out of the police station. She's pestering Gail Weathers for her thoughts and feelings on the recent unfortunate events, and Gail, who's getting increasingly annoyed at Debbie, snaps at the woman to leave her alone. Gail's cameraman Joel officially quits. Things are getting too dangerous for him, and he doesn't want to end up dead in a news van like Randy or Gail's previous cameraman from Scream 1. As Dewey walks out of the police station, Gail gives him a heartfelt apology, and he finally forgives her. Dewey and Gail examine the bag that her ex-cameraman dropped at her feet just moments ago as he quit. It's filled with recorded footage of Gail reporting at the crime scenes. Then Gail has another light bulb moment. There's crowd footage in this bag of the people at the crime scenes, and the killer may be on it. Ghostface has shown that he enjoys stalking his victims, and seems to love every moment of attention that his crimes are getting, so why wouldn't the killer be at the crime scene soaking up the moment? So it's time to check the footage for people in the crowds that make multiple appearances. Dewey and Gail head to the college's film building for a VCR to investigate the footage. On a side note, what I'm about to say is not important, but I felt compelled to point this out. Dewey is one smooth operator. Almost immediately while they investigated the footage, he and Gail had some serious sexual tension going on. They even ended up making out. I think Dewey might be a pickup artist. Anyways, while Dewey and Gail get freaky, they eventually notice that Ghostface is in the upstairs projection booth watching them, and Dewey decides to chase after the killer, leaving Gail alone in the room. First Derek and now Dewey. Jesus Christ, why do the men in this movie feel the need to play hero, confronting a knife-wielding killer without a weapon? And why hasn't Dewey or Gail thought ahead of time about getting a gun to protect themselves should they confront the killer, especially because they are gallivanting around campus, alone at night, to investigate Ghostface? Anyways, while Dewey is busy searching the upstairs room for Ghostface, the killer somehow manages to pop up behind Gail without her noticing, but thankfully she's able to repeatedly dodge and outrun the killer's knife swings. Dewey hears the commotion and comes running back to help Gail. Gail runs out of the film room and into the hallway. She manages to lose Ghostface, and while running, Gail tries to open random doors along the way so that she can hide inside another room, but they're all locked. Luckily for her, she finally stumbles upon a room that isn't locked, so Gail enters the room and locks the door behind her. While running through the neighboring rooms in search of an exit to the building, Gail almost accidentally stumbles into Ghostface's line of sight. They are in adjacent rooms that are separated by a giant glass window, which allows them to see each other. But lucky for Gail, the killer did not notice her when she noticed him. Gail then hides behind a different wall to stay out of Ghostface's sight when he wanders into the room that she's in. At the first opportunity, Gail leaves her hiding spot behind a wall to run inside a nearby room. Unfortunately, this room's door does not have a lock. This new room Gail is hiding inside also has a giant glass window, and she doesn't notice Dewey behind her in the adjacent room, screaming her name and banging on the glass to get her attention. All the noise Dewey was making drew the attention of the killer, who then sneaks up behind him and repeatedly stabs him in the back. The door to the room that Gail is inside the adjacent room to the right of Dewey with the open door. He could even see the general layout of Gail's small room through the glass window to help him understand how how to get to her room's entrance. So I don't understand why the weaponless Dewey instead chose to scream at the top of his lungs and bang on the window glass to get her attention, with an armed killer on the loose that's pursuing them. Gale finally notices Dewey behind her and can't do anything but cry as he's getting assaulted by Ghostface. Then Gale runs to knock over a bookcase in front of her room's entrance door to barricade it closed, since the killer now knew where she was hiding, which she luckily manages to do just in the nick of time because Ghostface was right in the middle of opening the door. Ghostface can't get inside through the blockaded door, so he runs back to the giant window to break the glass so that he can get to Gale. He tries breaking the window with a chair and then tackling the window, but the glass just won't break. The reporter just stands there helpless and crying in fear until Ghostface finally gives up and runs away. The scene cuts to Sydney leaving her dorm with her detective bodyguards. She just finished packing some of her belongings and is now being escorted to a secret location to hide out until they catch the killer. Derek, for some unexplained reason, happens to be waiting outside of her dorm room as she's leaving. I'm guessing Derek and Sydney's mutual friend Haley probably tipped them off to what was happening as a favor, because the only people that were present when the police chief told Sydney about their plans to relocate her to a secret hiding place were other police officers, Dewey, and Haley, who's been allowed to go with her for emotional support. Derek and Sydney have another emotional moment where he reassures his girlfriend that he still loves her and will be there for her when this is all over. Sydney drives away and Derek just stands there watching the car like a lovesick puppy. I gotta say, Sydney must be amazing in bed. That's the only explanation I can think of for Derek simping this hard for her. Anyways, at that moment, Derek is ambushed by his frat brothers dressed in robes. They heard that he gave Sydney his fraternity letters necklace, which is against the rules, so they are here to punish him. So they kidnap and carry Derek to the drama building, strip him down to his boxers, tie his arms and legs to a theater prop on stage so that he can't move, and pour cold beer down his boxers and on top of his head. The scene cuts back to Sydney, Haley, and the detective bodyguards driving. They stop at a red light and Ghostface pops up out of nowhere. The killer punches through the driver's side window and then quickly cuts the throat of the driver. The second detective in the passenger seat attempts to get out of the car as Ghostface climbs on the car's roof. While the cop is getting out of the vehicle, Ghostface surprises him with a kick to the face and then grabs the policeman by the collar and repeatedly smashes his face into the car before then throwing him onto the ground. Looks like Ghostface is a part-time UFC fighter the way he's throwing hands. Sydney and Haley are trapped in the back seat because they are in a police car with a prisoner partition, which separates the backseat detainee from entering into the front seat. Plus, the backseat doors don't open from the inside. Ghostface pushes the dead driver out of the vehicle and then crawls into the driver's seat. He wants to drive the girls to a secluded location where he can then kill them. However, the cop that he threw on the ground gets up and is standing in front of the vehicle while pointing his gun at Ghostface, yelling at him to get out of the car and surrender. Ghostface shifts the car into drive, steps hard on the accelerator, and runs over the detective. The detective falls onto the car's hood and is hanging on for dear life as Ghostface continues to accelerate. The detective still has a gun in his hand, by the way. After quite a bit of driving, with the detective hanging onto the hood, the cop's life is finally ended when Ghostface drives through a construction area and smashes the car into the back of a construction vehicle with a bunch of metal poles in the cargo bed, and one of these metal poles impales the policeman through the head. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. The average reaction time for humans is 0.25 seconds to a visual stimulus. When the police car was stopped at the red light, right before the first detective had his neck cut, it took approximately 2.5 seconds for Ghostface to pop up out of nowhere and then punch through the driver's side window. The driver had more than enough time to move his foot just a couple inches to tap the gas pedal and accelerate his vehicle out of Ghostface's reach. Research from the Force Science Institute shows that a standing suspect can draw a pistol from their waistband, point, and then shoot in an average of 0.25 seconds. I'm not sure how being in a sitting position affects the time that it takes someone to draw and shoot a gun from their waistband, but for the sake of argument, let's say that it takes 3 times as long to shoot someone from a sitting position, then that's still 0.75 seconds, which is more than enough time for one of the detectives to put a bullet in Ghostface within the approximately 2.5 seconds that it took Ghostface to pop up and punch through their car's window. Then when Ghostface first crawled into the vehicle's driver's seat and the second detective got up from the ground in front of the car with his gun pointed at the killer, the officer should have just shot Ghostface during the multiple seconds it took the killer to dramatically stare down the detective, then shift the car's gear to drive and press the gas pedal. I mean, it seems like at least once a month I see a new video on the internet of a police officer quickly shooting a suspect that grabs for a weapon, or grabs for what the police mistake for being a weapon, but really isn't. I've even seen videos where suspects get shot to death for just advancing aggressively towards the police with a knife or some other non-projectile weapon in their hand. So for a detective to be still trying to use words to get Ghostface to stop after the killer just cut his partner's throat made no sense to me. Then once the scene progressed to the point where the detective was on top of the car's hood while it was being driven by Ghostface, the cop was shown for a period of time pointing his handgun directly at the killer while yelling at him to stop the car. At any moment here, the detective could have and should have shot Ghostface to death through the windshield. I can't understand why this detective keeps trying to talk the killer into surrendering. Back to the story. The impact of the car collision knocks Ghostface unconscious. While Ghostface is passed out, the girls notice a metal pole is ripped through the prisoner partition separating the front and back seats. The girls then peel open the broken prisoner partition, climb through the opening into the front passenger seat, realize the passenger door is blocked by construction equipment on the outside of the vehicle, so they have to climb over Ghostface's unconscious body to get out of the car through the driver's side door, which they slowly and carefully do without touching the killer for fear of waking him up. After managing to crawl out of the car, the girls run away together, but then Sydney changes her mind upon realizing what a perfect opportunity that she just passed up to at least take the mask off of the unconscious killer. Knowing his identity would finally put a stop to all of this drama, and Ghostface may be gone if they run away and call the police to handle this, so Sydney walks back to the car despite Haley yelling at her not to risk it. When Sydney gets to the car, she sees that Ghostface has disappeared, and while she turns around to tell Haley that the killer is gone, Ghostface pops up behind Haley, puts her in a chokehold, and proceeds to repeatedly stab the poor girl to death while Sydney just stands there, watching and screaming in terror. Alright, let me explain how you can survive. These girls passed up on so many opportunities to stop Ghostface while he was unconscious that it makes my head hurt just thinking about it. They may not have been strong enough to choke Ghostface to death without risking him waking up and overpowering them, but how about blinding him so he can no longer be a threat? You have fingernails, car keys, glass shards from a broken window and windshield, and likely other sharp objects inside the car that you could use to stab and gouge out the killer's eyes. Plus, the impaled detective on the windshield of the car still had a gun in his hand that you could grab and shoot the killer with. Back to the story. After just standing there in shock, watching her best friend being killed, Sydney finally decides to run away, and Ghostface just stands there watching her. The scene cuts back to Gail in the film building, who's not sure if the killer is still pursuing her as she cautiously searches for the building's exit. While sneaking through the hallways, Gail stumbles into Cotton, who has blood all over his hands. She panics thinking he's the killer, but Cotton begs her to please calm down and that this isn't what it looks like. He just happened to find Dewey's body and tried to help, which is why he's covered in blood. Gail does not believe Cotton, so she runs away and finally makes it outside of the building. The first person Gail sees outside using a nearby payphone is the local reporter Debbie Salt. Gail yells at Debbie to shut up while she hijacks the phone from her. She then calls the police and tells law enforcement that Cotton is the killer. The scene cuts back to Sydney running into the theater building to hide from Ghostface. On a side note, I can't understand why people in horror movies seem to always feel this need to isolate themselves, which makes things easier for the killer. Sydney should have ran to the nearest college dorm for help, protection, and to call the police. There's safety in numbers. There's supposed to be heightened police presence on the campus because of the recent murders. How about running to a campus payphone to call the police and have the nearest patrol car sent over to your chosen hiding location? It's likely just 1 or 2 minutes away. Back to the story. Inside the theater building, while Sydney is walking across the stage, a spotlight is turned on and pointed at her. Then Derek in a theater mask, who's still tied up to the theater prop from when his frat brothers were hazing him earlier, gets lowered from the air onto the stage behind Sydney. Sydney takes the mask off of the tied up person and discovers that it's her boyfriend Derek. On a side note, if Derek's frat brothers left him tied up to a theater prop overnight after hazing him, and the guy still being here is not just the work of the killer kidnapping him and retying him to that same prop, then those students are absolute idiots. Fraternities and sororities get shut down for hazing incidents like this. If anyone found out about this, the entire college would be in hot water and all over the news. There might even be a giant lawsuit on the horizon because of this. I'm talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. As Sydney struggles to undo the ropes that Derek is tied to, Ghostface finally makes his appearance. The killer reveals his identity and takes off the mask. Ghostface was Sydney's friend and Derek's best friend, Mickey Altieri. Then Mickey plays mind tricks on Sydney by telling her not to untie Derek because the two are working together, just like in Scream 1, where her previous boyfriend Billy and his best friend Stu were both Ghostface. Derek vehemently denies working with Mickey and begs Sydney to trust him and untie the ropes. Sydney is conflicted and doesn't know who to believe. Mickey finally gets tired of screwing around with Sydney and pulls out the gun he stole from the detective that he killed earlier and shoots Derek in the chest. Unfortunately, there's no way for you to survive this death. You're tied up, completely helpless, and the killer has a gun. Even if Sydney blindly trusted you when Mickey was lying about you being an accomplice, and then without any hesitation continued to untie your ropes, you would still be shot at any moment while she's trying to release you from your bindings. Anyways, Derek and Sydney have one last emotional boyfriend-girlfriend moment where the guy tells her that he loves her and would never hurt her before he dies. Now that Mickey feels like he's won, and since he has a gun, the guy feels comfortable letting his guard down and bragging to Sydney about what he's done and his motivations. He wants the notoriety that comes with being a Ghostface serial killer and plans on purposely getting caught after he kills Sydney. The goal is to successfully use a legal defense blaming violent movies for their negative influence on him. Apparently that defense hasn't been done before, and he's going to get the pleasure of being at the center of a big national controversy surrounding the effects of cinema violence on society. While Mickey has his guard down bragging to Sydney, she swings the necklace that Derek gave her at the killer's eye and then kicks the gun out of his hand. Can we take a moment to appreciate just how insanely accurate someone has to be to swing a small necklace pendant perfectly into someone's eye on the first try in a life or death situation? Sydney's character is supposed to be just a normal American girl who doesn't have any martial arts or street fighting experience, so it doesn't make sense to me why in a high pressure situation like this, she all of a sudden transforms into an action movie star. Anyways, Mickey and Sydney get into a fist fight, and she's somehow holding her own against a man that's significantly bigger and stronger than her, until Derek finally gets the bright idea to just go grab the gun that got kicked out of his hand earlier. Mickey starts to gloat again about how perfect his plan is now that he's got the situation back under his control. Then the mystery person pulls the lever to raise Derek and the prop that he's tied to back into the air, and Mickey's partner in crime finally walks into the room with the gun pointed at Gail. Mickey has been working with Debbie Salt, the local newswoman. Turns out that's a fake identity. She's actually the mother of Billy Loomis, aka the original Ghostface killer from Scream 1. The lady lost a lot of weight and had some plastic surgery, which is why people didn't recognize that she was Miss Loomis. Billy's mom is back for revenge against Sydney for killing her psychopath son, and apparently she met her crime partner Mickey on an internet forum. They built a friendship online, formed this plan, and she paid the tuition for Mickey to go to Windsor College so that he could get close to Sydney. Miss Loomis then double crosses Mickey and shoots him multiple times in the chest. She can't risk him revealing her involvement in these murders. It would have been smarter for Miss Loomis to wait until Sydney and Gail are dead before she double-crossed Mickey. Now she's alone and in a potential 1 versus 2 situation should Gail and Sydney get bold and decide to attack Miss Loomis even though she has a gun. Mickey, while being shot, attempts to shoot Miss Loomis back, but accidentally shoots Gail in the stomach as she tries to run away during the gunfight. Now it's just Miss Loomis and Sydney Prescott left, and Miss Loomis starts gloating about how well her plan is going, and then starts blaming Sydney's mother for breaking up her family and stealing her husband, and Sydney for killing her son, thus completing the destruction of her family by the Prescotts. I guess the fact that her son was a serial killer and that Sydney killed him in self-defense is just a minor unimportant detail to her. But I can't fault the lady for blaming this on Sydney's mom being a homewrecker. Billy Loomis started killing people and executing a revenge plot against Sydney's family in response to his own family being torn apart. While Miss Loomis is distracted with arguing the merits of her actions, Sydney sneakily grabs a glass bottle that just conveniently happens to be on a shelf that's behind her and smashes it on Miss Loomis's head. Miss Loomis recoils in pain, and Sydney uses this opportunity to run inside the theater's backstage door and locks it behind herself. Miss Loomis can't open the door, so she blindly shoots through it in hopes of hitting Sydney. Then while Billy's mom is trying to force open the door, Sydney uses her elbow to break open an emergency glass case with the hatchet inside, and then uses the hatchet to cut a rope that is holding up some stage lights. The stage lights fall on top of Miss Loomis, but she manages to jump out of the way at the last second. Then Sydney starts cutting more ropes and fooling around with buttons and levers on a control board, thus causing a bunch of other stage equipment to fall over and almost hit Miss Loomis. Billy's mom tries to climb a fake rock wall on the stage to get into the backstage area that Sydney is hiding in, but Sydney cuts a rope that causes the wall to fall over on top of and bury Miss Loomis. I'm just wondering how the heck Sydney sees where Miss Loomis is standing on the theater stage from behind a wall to be able to so accurately cause stage props to fall on her. Sydney thinks she's won the battle and runs towards the backstage exit door when suddenly Miss Loomis jumps out of the stage curtains to ambush the young girl with the knife. I guess Miss Loomis lost her gun in the rubble when the fake rock wall fell over on her. How convenient. Anyway, Sydney and Miss Loomis are having a fist fight where Sydney is dodging the crazy woman's knife swings like an expert martial artist while serving her up some knuckle sandwiches to the face like she's Mike Tyson in his prime. During the fight, Sydney trips and Miss Loomis jumps on top of her, thus forcing Sydney to struggle with all her might to hold back Miss Loomis's knife hand from coming down on her. The struggle over the knife is put on pause when Cotton shows up out of nowhere with a gun. In this moment where Sydney was distracted looking at Cotton, Miss Loomis manages to stand the girl up on her feet and puts a knife to Sydney's neck to use her as a shield. While holding Sydney hostage, Miss Loomis tries to persuade Cotton to agree not to intervene and allow her to kill the girl. She explains how her killing Sydney would benefit Cotton because they can come up with a story for the events that took place that paints Cotton as the hero and only survivor, which would finally give him the spotlight that he's been wanting. Cotton looks like he's being swayed by Miss Loomis's words, and Sydney begs Cotton not to listen to the murderous old lady. So Cotton asks Sydney, why shouldn't he, when Sydney hasn't agreed to help him by doing any interviews together after being the one whose incorrect testimony put him in prison. Sydney gets the message and promises to do the Diane Sawyer interview with Cotton. And that's all Cotton needed to hear. He sides with Sydney and shoots Miss Loomis in the chest. We get some more good news. Turns out that Gail Weathers is still alive. Apparently she was just playing dead after getting shot by Mickey. The bullet hit her in the torso and bounced off her ribs, so she only has a pretty minor injury. Now that the danger is over and police and paramedics are on the scene, Gail's cowardly cameraman Joel, who quit earlier, comes back to help her be the first one to report on the incident. Turns out that Dewey survived the stabbing attack from Ghostface. He gets carried out on a stretcher by paramedics, and he has some serious injuries. And Gail, for once in her life, puts other people before her career by abandoning trying to report on the crime scene first to keep Dewey company inside his ambulance. Sydney gets swamped by reporters who are trying to interview her and get her to explain what happened. She chooses to hold up her end of the bargain to help Cotton get the spotlight that he desires by refusing to comment and telling the reporters to talk to Cotton. He's the hero that saved the day and the one who can explain everything that happened. So Cotton finally starts getting the spotlight that he's been wanting, and instead of telling the reporters that are now swarming him what happened with Ghostface, he gives them a business card and tells them that they are going to have to pay for an interview. And the movie ends with Sydney emotionally clutching the fraternity necklace her dead boyfriend Derek gave her and then walking away from the crime scene. Thanks for watching. I'm going to be covering the other Scream movies, so if you're a fan of the franchise, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Anyway, stay tuned for more How to Beat and Why You Wouldn't Survive videos from your favorite nitpicky movie nerd. Bye bye!